Well, I don't think anyone predicted those results in the Premier League this weekend, did they? And now we've got a massive set of midweek fixtures coming up for Game Week 27, with plenty of twists and turns still to come, I'm sure, in the title race, the race for Europe, and the battle against relegation down the bottom as well. This is the prediction show where we take a look at all the main stories, all the talking points around each of the 10 games, and obviously we give our predictions as well. Let's get stuck in. Well, first up in this midweek set of fixtures for Game Week 27, it's Brighton against Bournemouth at the Amex. And again, it's another South Coast clash. Bournemouth have been terrific pretty much all season. And then last weekend, they have that surprise home defeat to Wolves. But equally, Brighton, for all their patchy form over Christmas and New Year, I think they went 8 games without a win over Christmas. They're still only 3 or 4 points off those European places themselves. So it feels like there's a lot riding on this, and it's a difficult one to call. A draw probably does maybe suit both teams, and a draw would keep them both in the hunt, and a draw is maybe the most likely outcome if I'm using my head. But I actually think I'm going to go for a Bournemouth win here. I was so gutted with that result and the performance against Wolves at the weekend, and I'm not even a Bournemouth fan, but they'd have been sat in the Champions League places right now. That's astounding, and it feels like the margin for error is so tight this season. And Bournemouth are really strong away from home, They're on a run of 7 games unbeaten on the road, and they've scored 20 goals in those 7 games as well, so high scorers. It's going to be a really tight game to call, this one. I'm going to back Bournemouth, though. I'm going to back Bournemouth. I think they've got just enough within the squad, within the attack, to cause Brighton problems. And even though they've not got Zabani, obviously that's sending off against Wolves, which I thought was marginal, but he got sent off. He's going to miss this one. I think I'm going to back Bournemouth to get a shock away win at the Amex. So I'm going to go for 2-1. Brighton 1, Bournemouth 2. Let me know what you think. So next up on Tuesday night, 7:30pm kickoff, it's Wolves against Fulham from Molineux. And again, it's another game I'm finding very difficult to call. Wolves are a little bit of a bogey side for Fulham, I believe. I think Fulham have won once in their last 5 head-to-heads against Wolves, so not a side they enjoy facing. And obviously Wolves battered Fulham at Craven Cottage earlier this season. That was a big, big surprise, especially given where Wolves have found themselves for most of the season, down in and around the relegation zone. And Fulham subsequently have been incredibly hard to beat at Craven Cottage. So yeah, difficult one to call, this one. And looking at the form table, I'm not entirely sure that helps us. I mean, Fulham lose at the weekend against Crystal Palace. They'll be wanting to bounce back from that one. They have only got 1 defeat in their last 9 away games, so their away form is, arguably as good as their home form, to be honest. Wolves were really impressive against Bournemouth at the Vitality, and that took them 5 points clear of Ipswich. I mean, arguably it's 6 because their goal difference is much better as well. So Wolves are in a really strong, healthy position. Obviously, it can all change very quickly down there, and Vitor Pereira won't want to switch off. He'll want to keep that momentum going after last week. So I think it's going to be a really interesting game, this one, and I'm finding it very, very difficult to call, partially because Matheus Cunha was again phenomenal at the weekend, and he's just in a terrific run of form. I think I'm going to have to sit on the fence on this one. I think it's going to be a high-scoring draw. I'm going to go for a 2-2. I'm going to go Wolves 2, Fulham 2. Let me know what you think. So next up, another Tuesday night, 7:30pm kickoff. It's Crystal Palace against Aston Villa from Selhurst Park. Now, Palace's away form is up there with the best of them, and they proved that again this weekend by winning at Craven Cottage, a really tough place to go. That's after wins away at Old Trafford, wins at Leicester, wins at West Ham. They've won away at their rivals Brighton. They've been really, really good on the road. Obviously picked up points at the Vitality as well, and just a really difficult away team to play against. But at Selhurst Park, they're on a really difficult run. They've not yet won at home in the league in 2025, and they've got back-to-back defeats there against Brentford and Everton last time out, and they've just not really been at their best at Selhurst Park. That said, Aston Villa are dreadful away from home. They've got 1 win in their last 9 league away games. I'm going to have to sit on the fence again, and it's really frustrating because I love both of these sides. I really like Oliver Glasner and the way he sets Crystal Palace up. I love watching Jean-Philippe Mateta, very underrated player. But there's a lot to like about Unai Emery as well. And, Asensio, Marcus Rashford, Ollie Watkins, all driving forward, Morgan Rogers. They're both really, really good sides, and Aston Villa have to win. They have to win this one. Selhurst Park's not been a happy hunting ground for Crystal Palace recently. They've not got an awful lot left to fight for this season. Villa do. Villa are they're hunting for those Champions League positions, and there's 5 up for grabs. They've got to maintain the pressure on the teams above them, and this has to be a win for Villa. But I don't think they're going to get it. I don't think they're going to get it. So I'm going to go for Crystal Palace 1, Aston Villa 1. I wouldn't rule out a Villa win, but I'm going to go for the points. I think it's going to be a draw. Let me know what you think. Have I got this totally wrong? So next up, another Tuesday night game. It's the 8:15 later kickoff, though. It's Chelsea against Southampton at Stamford Bridge. This feels like a Chelsea win. I'm not going to spend an awful lot of time on it because I can't look past the Chelsea win. I just think Southampton, where they are, the way they've been playing recently, they've got all the hallmarks of one of the worst Premier League sides we've ever seen. Ivan Juric, again, I keep giving him compliments because he has done well. He has had an effect on Southampton, and they do look better, particularly away from home. I just can't see him going to Stamford Bridge and getting anything, though. The best I can see is that maybe they get to half-time level and maybe they create a bit of unrest and panic in those Chelsea ranks, because Chelsea have to win this one. They absolutely have to win this one. If they've got any hope at all of European football, not just Champions League football, by the way, at any European football next season, you've got to be beating Southampton at home. No disrespect to Southampton, they are where they are. Chelsea, I thought they were much better against Aston Villa. Yes, they lost, and it wasn't a fantastic performance, but I think there's maybe enough encouragement there that Chelsea haven't looked as bad as maybe they have done in recent games. The 2 games against Brighton, they were dreadful. They've thrown points away against Fulham, against Bournemouth at Stamford Bridge. And Enzo Maresca's been a little bit naive in terms of how he set Chelsea up at times. That said, I think they're going to get the win here. The likes of Caicedo, Enzo Fernandez, Cole Palmer, obviously, they are top players. They are Champions League footballers in a side that maybe isn't littered with the quality we originally thought. At the start of the season, everyone thought Chelsea, Gary Neville said it, didn't he? He thought they might make an assault on the title. And actually, before Christmas, they looked like they might, but it ain't happening. It ain't happening. Now they're struggling for the top 4, struggling even for the top 6. This has to be a win, and I think it will be. I don't know if it's going to be as comprehensive as maybe many Chelsea fans will be hoping and expecting, but I think they're going to get the win. So I'm going to go for Chelsea. I'm going to go for Chelsea 2-1. Chelsea 2, Southampton 1. Let me know what you think. On to Wednesday's games, and it's another 7:30pm kickoff. It's Brentford against Everton. Brentford have had an upturn in form, haven't they? 3 wins in the last 4, 3 away wins as well. They won at Selhurst Park, then they went to West Ham and won, and then on Friday Night Football they smashed Leicester. Really good performance as well. I know it's Leicester, not knocking Leicester, but tough place to go for a side that's down there, that's fighting, and they went and dispatched them really, really well. Especially when you consider that Brentford, earlier in the season, couldn't buy a win away from home. Again, I've said this in recent prediction videos, but it feels like it needs reasserting. Brentford, unbelievable at home early part of the season. I think they had the best home record in the league. Couldn't buy a win away from home during that period. Now, completely the opposite. At home, they haven't won in their last 6 home games, and then away from home, they're on this magnificent away winning run. So something's changed at Brentford. I don't know what it is, don't know what Thomas Frank's done. Maybe he needs to reverse the process, I don't know, but something has changed. And all of a sudden, they find themselves actually only a few points away from the European places. But they've got to tighten things up at the back. They've not kept a home clean sheet since May last year. And they welcome an Everton side who've got 4 wins in the last 6, unbeaten since David Moyes came to the club, and free scoring as well. Everton started to find some goals. Everton have scored 14 goals in their last 6 league games under David Moyes, and they'd only scored 15 goals in 20 league games under Sean Dyche this season, so it's a big upturn. Everton have also won back-to-back away games under David Moyes, away at Crystal Palace and away at Brighton, both by the odd goal as well, which is maybe David Moyes' forte. And when you consider that Brentford have only scored 3 goals in their last 6 home games, all signs point to this being a low-scoring affair. You can't keep saying draws. I'm going to go Brentford 1-0. I'm going to go Brentford 1, Everton 0, Brentford just to nick it. I think it's going to be a tight game. I can't see there being more than 1 goal in the game, although I keep saying that and then it's massive high-scoring games. So I can't see there being too many in this one. I'm going to go Brentford 1, Everton 0, just to nick it. Let me know what you think. Next up, another Wednesday 7:30 game. It's Manchester United against Ipswich Town at Old Trafford. I think we've seen enough of Ipswich this season to know they can cause teams problems away from home. They get the win away at Spurs. That was massive. They then go to Wolves and win. They've had points away at Craven Cottage, a point away at Villa last week with 10 men as well for most of the game. In between that, they win away at Coventry in the FA Cup, which was very impressive as well, by the way. They've had narrow defeats only at Nottingham Forest, away at Arsenal. They've done all right away from home. They've done really, really well, and they can come to Old Trafford with real confidence. They have to start winning soon if they're going to drag themselves out of that relegation zone, because the Wolves win last week and they got battered at home to Spurs. I've got to be honest, I think Ipswich might just start finding a gap being created with them and the rest. And if they're not careful, they need to start clawing that back. Leicester and Southampton look gone. There's just a shred of hope for Ipswich. Not much, but there's a little bit. They're the only one that's clinging on to life in the Premier League. And this would be another big away scalp for them, wouldn't it? And let's be honest, Man United have not got a fantastic home record. Just in the last couple of months, they've lost to Forest, Bournemouth, Newcastle, Brighton, Palace, as well as pretty poor displays at home to Leicester in the Cup. They were very lucky to get through there. They've also needed very late, scrappy winners after very uninspiring performances at home to Rangers, Southampton, of course. And I just don't think Ipswich have got anything to fear going to Old Trafford. They can go there and have a really good go, They've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. Whereas United, it kind of feels the opposite, doesn't it? They've had another bad week in the press, lots of news around redundancies and stuff off the pitch that's not going so well. On the pitch, that first half performance against Everton was up there with probably the worst Manchester United performances I've ever seen. As a Liverpool fan, it was almost horrifying. I felt pity towards Manchester United and Ruben Amorim a little bit, because you could see on the touchline at half-time, he just looked lost. It just feels like everything's really negative around the club at the minute, and has felt for many years. It's like a toxic black hole sucking everything, whether it's fans, players, managers, all into it, and it doesn't matter how good they are or how hard they're working. And I would say that, by the way, I think there's players at Manchester United, Harry Maguire, Bruno Fernandes, who are really suffering with the club at the minute. And I think Amorim, by the way, is a fantastic coach who will get it right at United eventually. The poor guy looks 10 years older since he's got to Old Trafford, and he's only been there 5 minutes in the grand scheme of things, but he probably should have made a bit more of a difference. I think we can level criticism at Amorim, and we can level criticism at some of the players. They just don't necessarily know what the system is. It's quite new to them, and Amorim is sticking stubbornly and rigidly to one way of playing. And I don't know if it suits the players he's got. We've seen that with David Moyes at Everton. I don't think the group of players Manchester United have are any worse than the group of players that Everton have. But Everton have found a way of working. They've found a system, and it's not been dreadful to watch under David Moyes. They've managed to get goals, managed to get results, and I don't see why Ruben Amorim couldn't do that. It feels like he wants to follow a certain way of playing, irrespective of the results. We're going to keep following this path, we're going to commit to it, and that's it. There's no more needs to be said. And if you aren't willing to fit this system, if you aren't able to fit this system, you'll be gone in the summer, and we'll be bringing a load of new people in. But that's an expensive way of doing things, isn't it? That's a very expensive way of doing things, whereas you've just got to try and win games. You've got to try and win games. You've got to start. I know that's an obvious thing to say, but as a football manager, I personally think it should be substance over style, and maybe Amorim disagrees, and that's fine. That's his right, and he'll live or die by that. And I think he's going to have to suffer quite a bit more between now and the end of the season. So I think United are going to struggle in this one, and I'm going to go for an Ipswich win. I'm going to go for Manchester United 1, Ipswich 2. I think Ipswich will have just enough fight to cause United problems, and even if they don't win, I think they get at least a point in this one. They've still got a little bit of fight and a little bit of hope that they can stay up in the Premier League, whereas United, they're playing for personal pride at this point. They've got one eye on the cup competitions because they have to. The league season's over. I mean, I'm sure Ineos and Jim Ratcliffe will be reminding Ruben Amorim and the players that, look, every position in the Premier League is an extra £3 million, and they're rationing toilet roll at Manchester United at the moment, so it all counts, every penny counts. But yeah, I'm going to go for an Ipswich win. Let me know if you think that's the Liverpool fan in me talking. Is that the heart ruling the head? Let me know. So next up, another Wednesday, 7:30pm kickoff. It's third against second, maybe the game of the game week. Nottingham Forest against Arsenal from the City Ground. It's been a bizarre few weeks for both of these teams, hasn't it? Nottingham Forest over Christmas win 8 out of 9 games, absolutely flying in the Premier League. Then they go to Bournemouth, admittedly a tough place, but they shock everyone by losing 5-0. Then they shock everyone again by battering Brighton 7-0 at the City Ground. And then since then, they've been taken to penalties by Exeter, they've been beaten by Fulham, and then they've just got battered by Newcastle. And for Arsenal, it's sort of the same, isn't it? You know, just a few short weeks ago, they smashed Manchester City, demolished the champions at home, you know, really laying down a marker in the title race, saying to Liverpool, we're coming for you, we've been the bridesmaid before, we want to be the bride now. And then it's kind of all fell apart. They go to Newcastle in the Cup and get knocked out. Then they all jet off to a training camp in the sunshine to reinvigorate the squad. And their only remaining striker picks up a really nasty injury and is out for the season. Then they go to Leicester and they get the win, but for 80 minutes or so they really struggle in attack. And then that leads us on to this weekend where West Ham beat them at the Emirates and they barely have a shot on target. And I think they're really going to struggle at the City ground, you know. Nottingham Forest at home are a different proposition to the Nottingham Forest we've seen away from home. At home, they've got 1 defeat in their last 10 games. Even the champions-elect Liverpool have gone there and really struggled recently. Fell behind, of course. And I think that Arsenal will do the same. I think it's going to be a tight game, but Arsenal's attack is a real problem for them. I think they're going to find it very difficult to score goals with no Saka, no Martinelli, no Havertz, no Jesus. And if they're not careful, Arsenal, the season could get much worse. You know, they're closer to Bournemouth and Newcastle in 5th and 6th than they are to Liverpool at the top. And look, in terms of showing caution, Nottingham Forest have to do so as well. It's not just Arsenal. Nottingham Forest now are only 3 or 4 points off dropping out of those Champions League places, and after such a fantastic season, what an unbelievably bad ending that would be to this story. Forest have done so well to get where they are, to get into this position. If they were to throw it away now, just as the season's culminating, even I, as a Liverpool fan, I've got no horse in the race, I'd feel really sorry for Nottingham Forest. They deserve to be hearing that Champions League anthem at the City Ground next season. And this is going to be a really defining game for both of these teams, I think, in terms of what happens for the rest of the season. I think if Forest were to win, it would probably set them on a path that maybe they do get Champions League football next season. It would give them confidence again. I don't think they were terrible against Newcastle at the weekend. They were really unlucky with that penalty decision. I've got to say, I don't like that penalty decision at all, the handball. It doesn't sit well with me. But I've got to say, I think if they were to win here, this would be a really big result for Forest, and I could see them kicking on. If they were to lose, then they might just spiral. You know, they've got some difficult fixtures coming up after this, Forest. They've got City at home in the Premier League after Arsenal, so it doesn't get much easier. So I think I'm going to go for a low-scoring draw in this one. I'm going to go for a 0-0, actually, because I think it's going to be decisive just how bad Arsenal have been in attack in the last couple of games. I think the way they performed against Leicester, the way they performed against West Ham, barely any chances, barely any shots on target, and just not great against teams that are sitting deep in that low block. And that's ultimately what Forest have been fantastic at this season, isn't it? You know, sitting deep, ceding possession, and not conceding very many goals. Obviously, at the weekend, they concede 4 against Newcastle. And look, sometimes when you see good defences conceding lots of goals in one game, it sometimes sparks them into life again in the next one. And I think if they come out with that mentality, Arsenal probably won't be able to break them down. They're a very good defensive unit. And then the only question is whether Forest can hit them on the counter-attack. And they might just, I wouldn't rule out a Forest win, but I'm going to go for a 0-0. Nottingham Forest 0, Arsenal 0. Forest maybe outside chance of winning it, but I think Arsenal's defence will hold tight as well. So I'm going to go Nottingham Forest 0, Arsenal 0. Let me know what you think. So next up, another Wednesday, 7:30pm kickoff. It's Tottenham Hotspur against Manchester City. And again, this is a flip of a coin, this one, isn't it? Because City lose back-to-back against Real Madrid and Liverpool. Spurs battered City 4-0 earlier in the season at the Etihad. That was such a big performance, such a big win. And we all thought that might have been something special, something, where Spurs could really kick on from there, but they just didn't. I think City just have too much ability. The table doesn't lie either. Look at where City are, look at where Spurs are. Yes, City are miles off the pace in terms of where we'd expect them to be, but I still think they are by far the better side. Maybe Erling Haaland isn't fit for this one. We don't know how bad that knee injury is. Spurs still don't have Romero or Van de Ven back there, and they've given up some chances recently. Even in the Ipswich game where they win 4-1, Ipswich have some really big chances early in the game and could quite easily have gone ahead. And against Man United, you could probably say the same. Man United had a couple of chances in the first half that they probably should have taken. So I think City are going to be far more clinical than those two teams, and I would be very surprised if City didn't score at least one. Equally, Spurs, going forward, they look a threat. Son looks like he's back to his best. Kulusevski, always a threat. Really, really good player. usually plays well against City. James Maddison back in the side, assisting against Ipswich. Brennan Johnson too, getting a couple of goals. Spurs have got options in attack again, and maybe, just maybe, they can cause City some problems. But I'm going to go with a City win. I think City are still a very, very good side. With or without Haaland, whatever the lineup, I think City will beat Spurs here. So I'm going to go for Spurs 1, Manchester City 2, Marmoush to score again. Let me know what you think. So the final game on Wednesday night is an 8:15 kickoff. It's Liverpool against Newcastle at Anfield. It feels like Newcastle aren't particularly enjoying the football at the moment. A bit like Nottingham Forest, actually. They've had an amazing first half of the season. Over Christmas and New Year, Newcastle won 9 games in a row, absolutely flying, a bit like Forest were. And then as they've come past that Christmas and New Year period, they've come into January and just in the last sort of 6 to 8 weeks, just slumped a little bit, and the performance levels have dropped. I don't know if it's maybe their energy, maybe the squad's getting a bit stretched. We have seen some changes in the Newcastle back line. Trippier coming out, Livramento coming out, Pope and Dubravka swapping, Botman in and out of the side. The midfield three not quite as settled as it normally was. Tonali and Joe Linton kind of in and out. And it's obviously had an effect. Going back to that Bournemouth game at St James's Park, they get absolutely battered 4-1 by Bournemouth. They then go to Southampton and they go behind in that game at St Mary's. They weren't terrific, but they got the win. They got it over the line. Then they lose at home to Fulham. Then they go to City last week and get battered 4-0. And it does just feel like they were coming off the rails a little bit. And then at the weekend, they get a big 4-3 win over Nottingham Forest. But they weren't that impressive, were they? They were 4-1 up at one point, and I've got to say, they were lucky to be 4-1 up because it wasn't a 4-1 game. They weren't battering Nottingham Forest. Forest take the lead. Newcastle basically gave them the lead. They get a penalty, which it isn't a penalty. It really isn't a penalty. That was a bad decision from the referee, and we don't want to see handballs given like that in football. That's not okay. Bad referee. And then they let Nottingham Forest back into the game. 4-1 up, and Forest come back into it. They end up getting back to 4-3, and now they've got to come to Anfield, and in the form that Liverpool are in, the way we're playing, with the confidence that we've been showing, I don't think there's a harder place in football to come. Now, that doesn't mean that Liverpool could, should, or will get complacent in this one, as I think we have been in recent games. Certainly the Wolves game at home, we were 2-0 up at half-time, and then we opened the door and let Wolves back in. We still get the win, but we were much, much better against Manchester City. It was a much more professional, composed performance. Great to win away at there for the first time in 10 years, to win at the Etihad for Liverpool. And coming into this one now, it feels like this Liverpool side will really want to reinforce that lead at the top, to really ram home why we are champions, or champions-elect. I don't want to be too arrogant just yet. But, why Liverpool are the best team in the league and why they have been the best team in football this season. We've been amazing. So I think this is where Liverpool will come and really show why they're such a fantastic team. And I expect them to get the win. I think Newcastle are fantastic going forward. Anthony Gordon is a player I won't underestimate. Isak, for obvious reasons, one of the best strikers in the league. Certainly can cause Liverpool problems, and has done at Anfield in the past, by the way. He's given Virgil van Dijk torrid times at Anfield and at St James's Park earlier this season. It wouldn't even surprise me if they went ahead, actually. They tend to start quite fast, Newcastle. So I think Liverpool will get the win, and I think it'll be a good game, a really good game for the neutral. Liverpool-Newcastle usually always is. Plenty of goals, lots of chances. Both teams really going for it. It's exactly the sort of football we like to see in the Premier League. None of this percentage football, pass. We want to see each team going at it, going for the win. And Liverpool and Newcastle always go for each other. And I think Eddie Howe will treat Liverpool with respect, by the way, but if he believes, as all Newcastle fans quite rightly believe, that they are a Champions League side, they've got enough ability in their squad to be competing with Liverpool. Maybe not this season, but next season. They've got the ability to compete with these teams at the top of the league. They've got to be coming to Anfield with confidence that they can get a result. At least a point. They've got to be coming here and competing. So I think that's exactly what Eddie Howe will do. I think he'll really go for it. So I'm expecting goals. I think Liverpool win 3-1. Liverpool 3, Newcastle 1. Let me know what you think. On to the final game of this game week, and it's a Thursday night game. It's an 8 o'clock kickoff. It's West Ham against Leicester City at the London Stadium. I think this could be a defining game for Ruud van Nistelrooy in his time in charge at Leicester City, because in his first game at the club, they played West Ham and they won. And in the 12 games since, they've lost 10, drawn 1, and won just 1 against Spurs not too long ago. But they've been dreadful. They've been absolutely awful, and it just doesn't seem to be getting any better. It doesn't seem like Ruud van Nistelrooy has made any really decisive changes to tactics, to shape, to personnel, to the players' attitude. It doesn't feel like their application has changed in matches. And I've spoke to quite a few Leicester City fans in the last week, many of whom have said that it's not really any different to what they experienced under Steve Cooper. And, there's protests before the Arsenal game not that long ago, and I think it's just getting to the point now with Leicester where they maybe need to make another change and bite the bullet. They're 13 points behind West Ham. They're 5 points from safety. They've got maybe just an outside chance of catching Wolves, but they're 13 points behind West Ham. If West Ham were to beat them, then, 13 becomes 16, and actually they've only got a chance of reeling in Wolves. That's really the only team they could potentially drag back into the relegation fight and save themselves. And it would take a huge upturn in performance from Leicester between now and the end of the season. And I just don't think they've got the squad, the ability to do it. Even if they had the mentality and they were, like you look at Ipswich. I think Ipswich's squad is probably a championship squad, but they're showing a bit more fight. Even Southampton recently, they've got a bit more fight that they can go to teams and they'll give them a real game. Leicester just seem beat before they step on the pitch in the vast majority of games I've seen them. And I hope I'm not being too harsh on Leicester, but I feel like the fans deserve a bit better. I feel like whatever the owners are thinking at the minute, Ruud van Nistelrooy, the decision to hire him just hasn't worked. And I don't think Van Nistelrooy's a bad manager either. I just think it's not a good fit. He's just not the right fit for the club at this moment in time. Maybe, I don't know, they need a Dyche. They need someone like Sean Dyche. I feel like that would be the perfect appointment for Leicester in this current situation. He might just have an outside chance of dragging them out of this. Someone like that who's going to come in and play really methodical, pragmatic football. It ain't going to be nice, but we'll get them up the pitch. It will keep clean sheets, and maybe they can get out of it. We've seen that with Dyche at Everton recently. Maybe he can turn it around. Who knows? I would much rather have Sean Dyche in charge of Leicester. If I was a Leicester fan, I'd much rather have a Sean Dyche in charge than Ruud van Nistelrooy, because between now and the end of the season, there's 11 games left, 12 games left. They ain't winning many of them. That's it. That's the season done. If they stick with Ruud van Nistelrooy, and maybe that's the plan. Maybe the plan is actually we'll go down with him and we'll allow him to build a side in his image in the Championship next year. Vincent Kompany did something similar with Burnley, didn't he? Maybe the same sort of thing is the plan with Van Nistelrooy, but I don't know, it feels like you're kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There's still a chance. There's still a chance if they really go for it, and maybe if they'd gone for it a bit earlier and made the decision sooner, they might have been able to. But I think for this game, I think it's just going to come a bit too soon, and I can only see a West Ham win. I think West Ham were much better against Arsenal. It's not been a massive improvement, but they've looked a little bit better defensively, haven't they? As I said in previous match previews, they've gone from conceding 3, 4, 5 goals a game under Lopetegui to maybe only 1 or 2 a game under Graham Potter. So the defence is a little bit more robust. And as we saw against Arsenal, the counter-attack is still there with Kudus, with Bowen, Souček making his way forward, Wan-Bissaka's playing a little bit further forward. They've got young Scarles on the left-hand side. I thought he had a good game against Arsenal the other day. And, with an injury crisis up top, they're playing without a recognised centre-forward. It's not just Arsenal who were playing without a recognised centre-forward last week. I think West Ham can get a win here. So I'm going to go 3-0. I think it's going to be a morale-boosting win for West Ham, and I think it might just spell the end of Ruud van Nistelrooy. If the Leicester board have got any sense, I think that's what should happen. So I think it's going to be West Ham 3, Leicester City 0. They've just off the back of a 4-0 defeat against Brentford at the weekend. They've got to let him go. They've got to let him go. Let me know what you think about the results, about Ruud van Nistelrooy, about all the results this weekend. Let me know what you're thinking. Put them in the comments below. I really appreciate hearing them. And if you haven't liked the video so far and you haven't subscribed and you're new around here, please consider doing so. It makes a massive difference to the channel. I post videos every single day on YouTube, on TikTok. I'm on Twitter or X, whatever it's called now. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. All the socials, the handles are all in the description. And thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one.